ରାଜୁ ଆସିଲେଣି ଲକ୍ଷ୍ମଣ ହ୍ୟାଲୋ ହ୍ୟାଲୋ
ଆସିନାହାନ୍ତି ସାର୍ ଆସିଲେ ଜଏନ୍ କଲେ ଜଷ୍ଟ ଜଏନ୍ କଲେ
ଆଚ୍ଛା
ସାର୍ ନମସ୍କାର
greetings and namaste to one and all
senior manku namaskar contemporary and others unko good wishes
all the best to all so welcome one and all to the second day of All Orissa Philosophy Association's 34th annual conference. We begin with Symposium 1. The topic is philosophy and language. The speakers on the list are Dr. Himanshu Samal, Dr. Rajib Lochan Behera, Dr. Ashok Kumar Tarai, and Dr. Deepak Kumar Behera. I understand that Dr. Himanshu and Dr. Ashok will not be participating in the symposium. So only few scholars, Dr. Rajib Lochan and Dr. Deepak Behera, would participate in the symposium. And I hope that both of them are present on the virtual platform.
Hello.
Are you present?
Yes, sir. I am present.
Okay. Welcome. Let me say a few words before we begin. We have 4 traditions in philosophy right from its beginning till date, I may say. The traditions are the tradition of ideas, the tradition of judgments, then the tradition of propositions and their meaning, and the tradition of sentences and their structure. Up till the end of 19th century, we did have the 2 traditions, the tradition of ideas and the tradition of judgment in play. The end of 19th century and the beginning of 20th century marked the advent of a new tradition, the tradition of propositions and their meaning. During this period, philosophy became very much self-conscious. Vis-a-vis theology, vis-a-vis science, and vis-a-vis common sense. Philosophy developed into a separate academic subject. It was not a separate academic subject. It was apron-stringed, so to say, with theology. Theology କାନି ଧରିକି ଚାଲୁଥିଲା. It developed into a separate academic subject, partly detached from classical scholarship, from theology, from economics, and last of all, from psychology. So ନିଜ ଘର, ନିଜ ବ୍ୟବସାୟ ସ୍ଥାନ ନିଜେ ଖୋଜିଲା ଫିଲୋସଫି. ଫିଲୋସଫି ନିଜର ଏଗୁଡ଼ା ସବୁ ନଥିଲା. 2 points are very much important to consider this tradition. 2 things happened. One is the laicizing of culture, and the second one is professionalizing of philosophy. Laicizing of culture means secularizing of culture. Culture in which philosophy occupies an important part became a secular subject. free from the apron strings of theology. Then the other one is professionalizing of philosophy. It has its own journal, its own discussion forums or fora. It did not have these things previously. So laicizing of culture and professionalizing of philosophy are benchmarks of this tradition. Eloquence and edification had been the deciding feature of the acceptance of a philosophical viewpoint, but they no longer are. What is the deciding factor? Logical arguments became the deciding factors for establishing or disestablishing a philosophical viewpoint. Gilbert Ryle writes very depthly about this tradition, how this tradition has meaning as its cornerstone. I quote from Ryle, "The story of 20th century philosophy is very largely the story of sense or meaning." What are meanings? He explains like this. Every line is important, and they invite us to go into relevant literature. And I may say this in passing, that due to the present generation of students and scholars and researchers not going into the basics of this tradition, not going into the basic books which has been written on this tradition, there are many misunderstandings, many lapses, and many failures. The story of 20th century philosophy is very largely is the story of sense or meaning. Meanings are what Moore's analysis have been analysis of. What meanings are what Russell's logical atoms were atoms of. Meanings in one sense but not in another, were what Russell's incomplete symbols were bereft of. Meanings are what logical considerations prohibit to the antinomy generating forms of words on which Frege and Russell have tried to found arithmetic. Meanings are what members of the Vienna Circle proffered a general litmus paper for. Meanings are what the Tractatus, with certain qualifications, denies to the would-be propositions both of formal logic and of philosophy. And yet, meanings are just what, in different ways, philosophy and logic are ex officio about. I may make two distinctions here. One is between linguistic philosophy and philosophy of language. Linguistic philosophy is not just philosophy of language, and philosophy of language is not just linguistic philosophy. Then the second one is that there is a difference between formal logic and informal logic. Formal logic, examples of formal logic we may take as deductive logic and inductive logic. Inductive logic is also formal. That it is material is not correct. That was called so 50, 60 or 100 years back, but not now. And informal logic is logic of language. So with these words, I would now invite Rajib Lochan Behera first to present his paper. The title and then the text. And I may say this about Rajib Lochan, that he is from Odisha, now functioning as assistant professor in philosophy in the legendary Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi, UP. Dr. Behera.
Pranam, sir. Pranam. Am I audible, sir?
Quite
Am I-
audible, audible. Please go on.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. At first, my pranam to all teachers and respected teachers and respected chairman of the Aopa and all the members of the Aopa and all the participants.
1 minute, your voice is not clear, sound is coming from behind.
It's okay.
No.
Not
ଗୋଟେ
okay.
ଚିଡଚିଡ ଗୋଟେ ଚିଡଚିଡ ହେଇ ସାଉଣ୍ଡ ଆସୁଛି। ଫ୍ୟାନ୍ ଲାଗିଛି କି?
No, no fan. Hello.
ଆପଣ ଅଛି କି ଏବଂ ଲ୍ୟାପଟପ୍ ମୋବାଇଲ ଦିଟା ଖୋଲିଛ କି?
ମୋବାଇଲ ଖୋଲା ଅଛି, ଲ୍ୟାପଟପ୍ ଖୋଲା ଅଛି।
ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ
ସରୋଜ
sound
ସାରଙ୍କ ଫୋନ ଟା ଅନମ୍ୟୁଟ ଅଛି। ତାର କାରଣ
ଆଚ୍ଛା ଟିକେ ମୁଁ ଚେକ୍ କରୁଛି।
ହଁ।
ଏବେ ତ ଶୁଣା ଯାଉଛି, ରାଜୀବ ର ଶୁଣା ଯାଉଛି। ଗଣେଶ
ଆଜ୍ଞା
ଏବେ
ସାର୍।
ଶୁଣା ଯାଉଛି। ନମସ୍କାର। ହଁ ନମସ୍କାର।
राजीव को छाड़ी अन्य समस्या म्यूट करदेले लेट अदर्स म्यूट सो दैट दे विल लिस्ट
सर
ଲକ୍ଷଣ ବି ଅନମ୍ୟୁଟ म्यूट कर दे।
Now it's okay. Am I audible, sir? Pranam, sir.
Quite
Pranam.
audible, but chit continues in some way. Perhaps your mind is chit now. Clear it up now. ठीक है.
So the title of my paper is, I want to say something about Aopa. So I am very much happy to present here, and I want to present a paper because of the blessings of my teachers from Orissa. So I could do something, and thank you so much for giving this opportunity to share some views on with you. So the paper is about philosophical analysis of language as expression and skin in Bertrand Russell and Ronald Barthes' philosophy of language. As we know that language expression is the knack to lead words and word transformers organized generate a thought which is meaningful and appropriate to the speaker, listener, and theme of conversation. With regard to the notion of language as expression and language as skin, Bertrand Russell argues that a language serves not only to express thought, but to make possible thoughts which could not exist without it. For Russell, the main purpose of language is to bind three elements such as fact, speaker, and listener. None of these elements can exist alone. For Ronald Barthes, language expression is an olden idea. That is an olden idea which assumes first that a truth prior to language resides within, and second that language is a tool for the expression of that truth. For him, language is a skin because language affects the other like skin to skin contact. For instance, when we write and when we speak about love, our language rubs against the undisclosed object to our desire. So my point is that language is intrinsic to the expression of communicating values, beliefs, and customs. It has an important social function and it nurtures feelings of being. This paper explores the Russell and Barthes' philosophy of language through the mechanical relation among facts, listener, and speaker. My conclusion would be closer to the synthetic model of language expression of the synthesis of fact, listeners, and speaker. Why I choose these two philosophers? Because as we know, Russell was a philosopher, not only a philosopher but also a social activist, a pacifist, an educationalist, and also advocate of atheism, while Barthes was a military man and a teacher. Both wanted philosophy to speak to ordinary people. This is the main reason to take both the philosophers here. And before discussing details about both, I would like to highlight some important point of the historical review of the study. In general, philosophy of language is a rich field in philosophy. It has a historical stretching back in the Western tradition to the pre-Socratic. It has a historical development through the ancient, medieval, modern, contemporary period of philosophy, meaning and its dimensions, theories, the language of thought, private language argument and metaphor. And it has been a central concern in both the Anglo-American and continental tradition. Both traditions' perspectives in philosophy of language call it the system perspectives. Thinks a language as a collection of formal rules which are so simple as to require to insight to apply them. So here a language is like algebra with its axioms and rules of proof. It has mainly focused on two kinds of rules, syntax and semantics. Syntax describes how minimal linguistic elements are put together into complex wholes, while semantics explains which each minimal linguistic elements means in the language and how the meaning of complexes depends upon each such part meanings together with the contribution of syntax. Moreover, language is taken for granted that words exist to express thoughts, and thoughts have objects which are that the words mean. It was thought that by means of language we could deal directly with what it means, and that we need to analyze with any care either of the two proposed properties of words, mainly that of expressing thoughts and that meanings things. Often we consider the object means by words. By words, when we consider words, they made the mistake of supposing more or less unconsciously that a word is a single entity, not as it really, it is a set of more or less similar events. The failure of consider language explicitly has been a cause of much that was bad in traditional philosophy. In this context, Russell argues meaning is only be understood if we treat language as a bodily habit which is learned just as we learn football or bicycling. While Barthes argues that language is meant for communication through discourse within the subject, we internalize discourse by creating alienation from self and world in several ways. The core issues of this paper discusses in two core sections like language as expression and language as skin. Now about language as expression. As we know, man has various advantages over the beast. For example, fire, clothing, agriculture and tools, not the possession of domestic animals, for ants have them. But more important than any of these, that is language. Language serves three purposes. One is fact, another one is speaker. We can say to indicate fact, to express the state of the speaker, and to alter the state of the hearer. Now, these three purposes are not always all present. If when alone I prick my finger and say, watch, only the speaker, you can say the expression of the speaker is present. In case of imperative, interrogative sentences, it involves also the expression of the it expresses the state of speaker and as well as the state of hearer, but not the fact. Lies involves the hearer, in a sense, the fact, but not the speaker. Explanatory statements made in solitude and without regard to a hearer involves fact and fact and speaker, but not hearer. Single words may involve all three. All three means fact, speaker, and hearer. For instance, if I find a corpse in the street and shoot murder, language may fail in fact and fail in hearer. The corpse may have died a natural death, and by hearer may be skeptical. In what sense can language fail as regards the speaker, like mentioned above, do not fail in this respect, since it is not their purpose to express the state of speaker, but lies belongs to the reflective use of language. When language is spontaneous, it cannot lie and cannot fail to express the state of the speaker. It may fail to communicate what it expresses owing of differences between speaker and hearer in the use of language. But from the speaker's point of view, spontaneous speech must express his state. The language called spontaneous when there is no verbal intermediary between the external stimulus and word or words. At least this is a first approximation to what I mean by spontaneous. It is not an adequate definition for two reasons. First one is the intermediary to the excluded not be verbal, though it must have something in common with what is verbal. Second one is stimulus need not be in any ordinary sense external. The second point being the simpler, let us consider it first. Suppose I say I am hot, and suppose that I say so because I am hot. The stimulus here is a sensation. Suppose I say there is a red flower because in ordinary parlance I see a red flower. The immediate stimulus is again a sensation, though I believe the sensation to have outside cause is, and if it has not, my statement is false. When I say I am hot, I may not expect other to be hot. For instance, if I have been running on a frosty day, but when I say there is a red flower, I expect others to see it too. If they do not, I am surprised with so that what I think we will see was part of what I was asserting. The statement I see a red patch of a certain shape is therefore logically simpler than I see a red flower. But I see a red patch is on a level with I am hot. It is however less spontaneous than I see a red flower and there is a red flower. Thus, instead of saying that a stimulus is external, we shall say that in spontaneous speech the stimulus is sensation. We must now consider what sort of intermediaries between stimulus and words are to be excluded in definition spontaneous speech. Take the case of ready lights. The schoolboy asks angrily, "Who made the world?" Replies without a moment hesitation, "Please sir, it wasn't me." Ethically, though not theologically, this was a lie. In such a case, the stimulus to the words is not what the words mean, nor even something having a close causal connection with what the words mean. Is the stimulus solely the desire to produce a certain effect upon the hearer? This requires a more advantageous knowledge of language than it involves in its exclamatory use. I think that in defining spontaneous speech, we must give a subordinate place to the desire to affect the hearer. In certain situations, certain words occur to us even if we do not utter them. The use of word is spontaneous when the situation causing it can be defined without reference to the hearers. Spontaneous speech is such a might occur in isolation. Mainly, let us confine ourselves from the present to speech that is spontaneous and indicative. I want to consider in relation to such speech the relation between indicative fact and expressing the state of speaker. In some cases, the distinction between fact and speaker seems to be non-existent. If I claim I am hot, the fact indicated in a state of myself and is the very state that I express. The word hot means a certain kind of organic condition, and this kind of condition can cause the exclamatory use of the word hot. In such case, the cause of the instance of the word is not an instance of the meaning of the word. This is still the case with I see a red patch, apart from certain reservations as to the word I see. Here, is in such case, there is no distinction between fact and speaker. The problem of truth and falsehood doesn't arise. For this problem, it is essentially connected with the distinction between fact and speaker. Suppose I say you are hot, and suppose I believe that I say, is that case I am expressing my state and indicating yours. So here truth and falsehood can come in. Since you may be called or you may even not exist, the sentence you are hot is in one sense significant if it can express a state of me. In what is perhaps any other sense, it is significant. It is true or false. Whether these are or not different sense of significance cannot be decided until we have defined true or false. For the moment, I shall confine myself to the first definition. I shall consider a sentence significant primarily if it actually expresses a state of myself, and from this starting point I shall endeavor gradually to reach a wider definition. What is happening in me when I state is expressed by the word you are hot? To this question there is no definite answer. I may be imagining a sensation of heat combined with the sensation of touching you. I may be expecting you to say I am hot. I may see beads of sweat of your face and make an inference. All that can be said definitely in that certain possible occurrences could surprise me, while certain others would give me a feelings of confirmation. Here the statement I believe you are hot expresses different state from the expressed by you are hot. The fact that is indicates is the fact expressed by you are hot. The question rises, can the statement I believe you are hot be replaced by an equivalent statement referring only to myself or not mentioning you? Now the problem here is that there are a number of states of my mind and body, any one of which when it exists makes it true to say I believe you are hot. You may assume that any of these states can be described with, you can say, sufficient accuracy by psychologists and physiologists. As summing this has been done for all such states, with the psychophysics to be able to know concerning any one of them that this is a case of believing you to be hot. And further, will he be able to discover anything in common among states except their relation to you and hotness? I think that in theory the answer to both questions should be affirmative. Essentially the problem is the same as that of discovering that hot means hot, which most children solve in about 18 months. If I am in any state that can be described as believing that you are hot, and you say, do you believe I am hot? I shall answer that I do. This is an experimental cause property of the belief, quite as satisfactory as those that are used in chemical state. There are, of course, complications, mendacity, difference of languages, but none of these effort by difficult of principle. We can now say the states of two persons who speak the same language are instances of the same belief if there is a sentence S such that each in reply to the question, do you believe S? Reply, I do. The person who to himself or to anyone that he doesn't wish to deserve S, believe S. Now two sentences S and S has the same significance if 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 whoever believes the one believes the other. Experimentally, in the case, if you hear a man say yes, and you ask him, "Do you believe yes?" he will reply, "Certainly, I have just said so." So now, one purpose of this discussion is to decide whether A believe P is a function of P. Let us substitute for the proposition P as sentence S. In logic, we are accustomed to think of either a proposition or a sentence primarily as capable of truth or falsehood. We can, I think, at least for the time being, discard propositions and concentrate on sentences. The essential point technically is that we are concerned with the argument to truth function. If V and R are two sentences, J or T is a third sentence, then whose truth or falsehood depends only upon the truth or falsehood of a S and T. In logic, sentences are treated technically as if they were things, but a sentence utterances in itself is merely a series of noise of no more interest than a series of sneeze or cough. What makes a sentence interesting in its significance, or to be more specific, its capacity for expressing a belief or indicating a fact. It acquires the latter through the former, and former through the meaning of its word, which meaning are causal properties of noise acquired through the mechanism of conditioned reflected. Now go for the second important part, is that language is skin. Here, Bates argues that language is a skin. It means language is not something that simply talked about the world in a neutral, you can say neutral fashion, but it is something that trembles with desire. So Bates writes of how I rub my language against the other. It is as if I had words instead of fingers, or fingers at the tips of my words. According to Bates, there are three levels of language, which creates discourse with the subject, and it creates alienations from self and world in several ways, if we internalize the discourse. In the first level of language, it establishes false linguistic entities within which the subject then, you can say, misrecognized the self. And in the second level of language, it traps the subject. It traps the subject into a system of infinite referral and deferral, which destroy the capacity for immediate experience of either self or world. In the third level of language, it searches meaning, where signifiers somehow have no assignable signifier. Here, language has always existed in the art and sciences, but since the subject is constituted by language, language creates discourse distinguished as self, and language creates discourse identified with the self. So language experienced at this level produces the ecstasy of an immediate encounter with reality. When you say alienation of self and the world, it is only part of the unwholesome psyche state which can be led to the change of language. More seriously, language systematically dearranges the senses, which has always limited man's perception of the object. Now, objectivity is today's only sure path to truth. We are perceptually warned against the dangers of pathetic fallacy. No rational person today, you can say, succumbed without identification. The subject-object distinction is commonsensical. Or you can say it is an embracement to an emotional immersion in a landscape or 2 hours. And it is certainly not to identification. The subject-object distinction is commonsensical. Scientific discourse reduces the spiritual or emotional produce a generally, yes, scientific discourse reduces what? It reduces to more spectatorship our relationship to reality. The scientific or rational, then which denies the spiritual or emotional. It produces a generally unperceived from alienation from nature, which it may be is really the most profound alienation from self. But language of any sort, scientific or not, leads by its very nature away from the object of one's gaze. Beth insists on keeping both meanings as if we were winking at the other, and as if the word's meaning were in that wink, so that one and the same word in one and same sentences means at one and other and the other. Actually, Beth accomplishes a number of things in that one and the same word. He creates the semantic delight he disrupts the possibility of any one levels of discourse claiming authority. Not with the polygism of these double words, but with their duplicity. And he creates a meaning without meaning, a signifier without a assignable signifier. There is a signifier which escapes the endless deferral of meaning that always occurs. In the operation of signifier, this is the level of language where the self can find itself, not as an infinitely receding discursive construct, but as styles, as pure significance. So significance is a prison of sense. There is meaning, but this meaning doesn't permit itself to be caught. It remains fluid. It remains shuddering with a faint, you can say, evolutions. Now I want to conclude my paper. Language deprives an entire life of any immediate experience of reality. The human predicament in language is infinitely subtle and seems paradoxical, no doubt, because our dilemma must be described in language. In this context, Bhatt says, on the other hand, it is the language is necessary to outplay the discourse which is internalized from the culture and constitute the ego, and then pretends as the self. On the other hand, it is not simply an addition to an already completed self, nor it is merely a tool for its expression, nor is language as an object or a language as a system which can be abstracted from human needs, humanness, and then repaired. But Russell says that all propositions concerning matter of fact are meaningful only to the extent that the expressions they content can be defined in terms of expressions standing for entities known by acquaintance. And it account to insofar as it has bearing on his philosophy of language, Russell's philosophy of language. And then that is a logical perfect language where a proposition would mirror the structure of the correlative facts. But the ultimate purpose of philosophical analysis is to discover the ontological structure of reality, to determine the basic furniture of the world. This is what I want to say. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Rajib Lochan, for your learned paper. But before I put it to discussion, let me have my reaction about your paper.
Sir.
As I understand, Roland Barthes is a semiologist. Is not it?
Yes.
A semiologist.
Yes, sir.
Semiology is study of science, and it is a scientific study of science. Philosophy studies not science, but what science express, that is symbols. Barthes is concerned with literary criticism and connected with it the concepts of pleasure, the concept of myth, etc.
Yes, sir.
How do you bring Roland Barthes into the mainland of philosophical discussion, which has concern with language? Barthes should discuss about what a text is, along with the postmodern philosophers like this. I quote a line from Barthes: "A text is made up of multiple writings drawn from many
Yes.
cultures and entering into mutual relation of dialogue, parody, contestation. But there is one place where this multiplicity is focused, and the place is the reader, not as was hitherto said, the author, like this." So, how do we bring all these things into the mainland of philosophical discussion where philosophy is concerned with language? As Russell is concerned with, as Wittgenstein is concerned with, they are concerned with the language in order to solve philosophical problems.
Yes, sir.
Then you cursorily refer to Russell, but did not discuss him in detail. You said that propositions are intelligible only when they are reduced to the propositions which refer to objects known by acquaintance, like this. You said that he was in favor of perfect language, but he was not in favor of perfect language. Ideal language is there for certain other purposes, for state occasions, he said. In his philosophical atomism, he said for perfect language or ideal language is for state occasions. State occasion ମାନେ ଏମିତି ଆମେ ବୁଝୁ, ମେଳାକୁ ଗଲାବେଳେ ଏକ୍ଜିବିସନ ଗଲାବେଳେ ଆମେ ପେଡିରେ ଯୋଉ ଲୁଗା ସାଇତି ରଖିଥାଉ ତାକୁ ପିନ୍ଧୁ, that is it. It is not meant for ordinary discussion. So that is Russell, and this is Barthes. How do we bring them together to bear with the philosophical problems that are solvable by conceptual analysis?
Yes, sir. So, sir, at first, I thank you for raising the issue. It is very important. My intention is to introduce both the philosopher, though they are not in from the same discipline, but the query was how language play a major role in human understanding as well as and in human knowledge. There I found both of them focused on, or they are you can say they wanted philosophy to speak to ordinary people. That means a philosopher as well as a teacher, or you can say he's also a philosopher, but though he's a military man, then later he became a qualified teacher, and he started thinking about how to deal with ordinary people, how to talk, how our conversation will be so fruitful. And in Bertrand Russell's philosophy also, I found he has argued language serves not only to express something thought, but it is also, it expresses something what is not available in the thought. Then where is it? So somehow they are thinking about the external world, and you can say the inaccuracy of observations, where we cannot say sufficiently we can acquire that. Insufficiency is there, but that is not the case, cannot be discussed in language. Therefore, there is a chain between self and the world. Though sometimes both not including both chain and the world can be entertained in language or linguistic frame, but in sociological point of view, or for uh, for uh, communication, or for the for even say convention, we can do it. Language, that is why he taken it very differently. Bach's taken very differently, in the sense something, language is a kind of cloth, or it's a kind of skin, where it affects everyone. Though the thought is not so much available with the listener, but it somehow affects what the speaker is saying, because we are so much linguistic being and socio-linguistic being. So in that respect, I found both the philosopher can entertain together to highlight the issue. And your point was about also Russell, how Russell said or emphasized or argued about the perfect language. It is not about something perfect. What do you mean by saying? But it provides some value. Our language, for Russell also, it provides some communicating value and some beliefs. That beliefs is, though it is that value is nothing but a collection of some rules, and that belief, to justify the beliefs, or after the justification of the beliefs, we acquire some value, or we get some value. But we can say it is not simply about the rules. Rules is specifically in philosophy of language, if you with regard to meaning, you simply use syntactical rules. But when you, that is not only the rules, there is also possibility of semantics. So there you will find it's a different kind of rule. It doesn't describe about the simple rules. It is go beyond the rules. That is, though the rules is part of meaning, but what semantics sorts that carry the rule syntax and go beyond that. That is the contribution of syntax. And here, a language granted something words, and which word Russell says something indicating facts, and it is also the expression of the speaker as well as the listener. But all three is sometimes not present altogether, but sometimes if you say hearer is not present, but you can say that
What happened? Rajib, hello. Lochan telephone kolo, Rajib Banaras पळेला.
କଟିଗଲା ବୋଧେ
Banaras पळेला phone करते.
ବନାରସ କଣ ଯିବ?
So let him come. I have already invited questions in the chat box. But before we attend to the questions in the chat box, I would like to invite Professor P.K. Mahapatra, Professor S.K. Mahanti, and Professor Ramchandra Majhi in this order to comment on this paper. Professor Mahapatra first.
Thank you. I fail to understand how these two persons are brought together into the discussions. So if they are using language, and that is the reason for bringing them together, then any two persons can be brought along with Russell. You can associate anybody else.
Moreover,
Russell
one
is a
being science of
philosopher
language,
of
the other is
language,
being
but the other person is not a philosopher of language, and he doesn't talk of philosophy of language or anything of that. If I am correct, I don't know. I have little knowledge of that. But the problem is that how to bring these two persons, and if you bring these two persons on the ground which Rajib has pointed out, that why he has brought them together, then on that ground any two persons can be brought together. Any novelist or any literary figure and Russell can be brought together. And the problems they are handling are different.
Right.
You should, this is for Rajib, he should explain what is the problem which both of them are tackling. Is there any common problem which both Russell and the other person is tackling? And moreover, there are some confusions regarding Russell's view on perfect language. Russell was definitely in favor of that that the ordinary language is leading, and a perfect language will get rid of these defects. And so he was in favor of, though how far it is practicable and how that is a different question. But his ideal was that there should be a perfect language, and there should, and ordinary language, where we say the God exists and the tigers exist, they are not used in the same tigers exist in the same sense. Then we should have different kind of expressions. Logically, they have different forms.
More
So that is what,
and definite descriptions.
yes, that is what he was there. So he was completely, his problems are different, and the other gentleman's problems are, if there is any problem, which he has not elaborated, I think, the problem which is faced by the other person. So, and also when you talk of these two persons and language is very vast topic. Without pinpointing on a particular topic area, we cannot have a very fruitful discussion also. Rajib, perhaps
Rajib,
Sir.
Oh, okay.
Rajib.
Yes, sir.
Please give your comments.
Did you listen to Professor Mahanti?
You find it relevant?
Yes, sir. Actually, I'm also in trouble. So thank you so much, sir, for making me trouble, because
you have put us into trouble and escaped to Banaras.
I hope I cannot reply you very correctly, because I taken from the two philosophers from the different different angle. But only one concern is that my main contention was that to focus how to talk to ordinary people. If a radical mathematical logician will discuss about logic, perhaps it will go in a very scientific observation of the.
Not a problem for Russell.
Sir?
Is that a problem for Russell? How to talk to ordinary people?
Yes, sir. For Russell, you see, the point is, I think it's a metaphysical inquiry. My query is the metaphysical inquiry. It's about metaphysical inquiry, because when a philosopher or a philosophy of language, or philosopher of philosophy of language, focus on like Bertrand Russell, he stressed on logic and the scientific inquiry of the language. There, it is very difficult to entertain with both linguistic and non-linguistic elements of the language, where sometimes we should focus on the what I may not think or I am thinking not to express, not able to express. That gap has to be fulfilled. So with with that regard, I found Bath is something saying about that. Uh, and
Rajiv,
Russell also at last.
Rajiv,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
there lies the difference. There lies the difference. Semiology or study of science takes all those things, linguistic and non-linguistic science, into account. And these philosophers, they take language symbols into account,
Yes.
discounting all the gestures and postures. They do not take gestures and postures into linguistic communication. So if Bhartish is studying that, he is doing a different thing altogether. That is not of the cup of tea of Russell or Huggins and these linguistic philosophers. That is our concern. Please, I am requesting Professor Majhi to comment on
Yes,
this.
sir. Yes, sir.
Professor Majhi,
ପ୍ରଫୁଲ୍ଲ ସାର୍ କହିବାର ଥିଲା ପା ମୁଁ ଆଗରୁ
Professor ବା ନାଁ ଦିଏ ନା ଆପଣ କହନ୍ତୁ।
ଆଚ୍ଛା ଆଚ୍ଛା
ପ୍ରଫେସର ଜଏନ୍ କରିପାରୁନାହାନ୍ତି, ତାଙ୍କର ଲାଇନ ନାହିଁ ବୋଲି, ସେ ତେଣୁ ଆସିଲେ ଜଏନ୍ କରିବେ କହିଲେ।
ଲାଇନରେ
ଆଚ୍ଛା
ଜଏନ୍
ଆଚ୍ଛା
କରନ୍ତୁ ଆପଣ କହନ୍ତୁ।
ଆଜ୍ଞା ଆଜ୍ଞା I believe language we use language to do several speech acts. And Russell's concern while thinking and talking about language were different from what I have not read Barth, so it will be it will not be very good on me to talk about Barth, but whatever Rajib has said, from that I have these conjectures that Barth's concerns were also different from what Russell had while talking about language.
Yes.
And Russell was more concerned about language, cognitive meaning, truth, communication. All these are important for him, and how to give a philosophical theory to to understand this kind of aspects of language. Barth probably is more concerned about language as a human phenomenon. And but Rajib is trying to link both Russell and Barth. Towards end of his paper, he was saying that both were concerned language. He has an idea that when we are using language should also speak of the ontology, and we should be able to understand what that ontology is while talking about the language. And Russell's ontology and Barth's ontology are different, and probably he prefers Barth's ontology when he talking about language. I actually didn't understand very well what he actually up to it when he's saying these kind of things. Cognitive meaning, when you are talking about, Russell is talking about cognitive meaning, and in some sense Barth will also can be said to be talking about cognitive meaning. But apart from cognitive meaning, language has other kinds of meanings. So he has he gives a, I think he uses a broad sense of the word meaning, and he I don't think Russell or Barth are each other.
Meaning.
Yeah.
Barth is concerned more with non-cognitive meaning than cognitive meaning.
Yeah, but in that sense, if non-cognitive meaning and also language, non-cognitive meaning cannot be understood independent of the cognitive meaning of language, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
Rajib,
I don't think
Rajib, your reaction?
Russell and Barth are not in conflict with each other's ideas and philosophy.
Rajib, your response?
Yes, I am agree with sir.
Shall I add something?
Yes, yes.
So
Ranjan, yes.
let us keeping aside the two philosophers Rajib is discussing. Let us start with the labels of. He is talking about the labels of language and syntax, pragmatics, and semantics apart. There is also the two other things like phonology and all these things. The other one I'm just not coming to my mind. So all these different aspects of language, when put into the scientific language and to the language we use in metaphysics, will definitely, if we put all these things, labels of language, they will definitely differ. So on this count, what these two philosophers are saying, probably he is trying to refer to that. And this is my understanding of the thing, because I joined late. I could not get what he actually wants to say. So that this is my observation of the things. Thank you.
Rajib, are you doing this? Rajib,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I am
you are doing
also
this?
agree with it. Yes, I am also
Can I
agree
add
with Ranjan.
something here, sir?
Yes,
Which
yes, sir.
Just a minute. Just a minute. You mean that you are concerned with the phonology of birth study? Phonology is
Not
study of
completely.
sound. Phonology is study of sounds. It is not an
It's
aspect
not.
of linguistics that you
It's
are
not.
concerned with.
It
Sir,
is
may I
not.
add something?
Sir, it is not completely about chronology. It is something beyond that.
Our
We have to come across that.
phonology,
We have to
phonology is a
come.
scientific study of sounds.
Yes, sir. We should come across that. We should not neglect that. Ignore that.
No,
To
we should
get the
what
semantics of the correct semantics or
now,
yeah,
whom
correct
are you
semantics of the word.
dictating these terms? Whom are you dictating these terms? Barthes says or Russell says or you say? We
No,
should be
both the
concerned. Bibu.
when I found the three levels of language from Barthes side and three purposes of language from Russell side, and I merge it and find out that
Okay, Bibu.
I yes,
Hello, Bibu. Are Bibu, you wanted to say something?
yes, unmute sir.
Bibu, unmute
Saying
କରି କୁହ.
actually
Bibu,
Unmute. Bibu Babu, unmute.
ଟିକେ unmute କରି କୁହ ନା. ହଁ,
Sir, let me add that
please add.
what I understood from the presentation, one is professionalizing cognitive meaning of language and expression, and the other side is talking about the social function of language. And that the other thinker, he is talking about experience of reality, and he said that language is necessary. But one thing that when we talk about the authentic communication, that the authenticity, where from it comes, what is the reality, and that how we communicate, maybe the other thinker in the social communication, that you need that to be very clear. And when we talk about the ontological situation, presentation of the reality in Bass thinking, that is purely about the sociological structure of language, structure and function of language. Russell is totally what Ram was explaining, understanding the language in a different way. But he had to throw light that what is the sociological function of language more clearly and show the difference between the two. Otherwise, it is mixing up.
Any other question from the audience?
Bihu Babu, that is what actually I was referring to, that when in social communication, this morphology, that is also important. Apart from this phonology and our syntax, semantics and pragmatics, morphology is also important. That is how you get the forms, the way you communicate in your social, and which will make a social relevance. So that is the contention I want to make.
Yeah.
This word has not been uttered by Rajib, morphology. Any question from the audience? There is no question in the chat box.
Because, sir, this fact, listener, speaker, but the listener here, the externality come. How to really communicate authentic way? Listener is not under your control.
Hello.
So there is no question in the chat box, and questions are not forthcoming from the audience. So I would now thank Rajib Lochan for his intelligent presentation, and I thank Professor Manti, Professor Majhi, Dr. Ranjit Ghosh, Dr. Bibhu, who participated in the discussion and made it a live one. Thank you again, Rajib Lochan.
Sir. Pranam, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaste. So I now come to Dr. Deepak Behera, who is in the panel. I think he is in the platform also.
Yes.
Yes, please come on and present your paper, Deepak.
Hello.
Mr. Deepak Behera is an assistant professor in philosophy, posted by MPC College, Baripada. Dr. Behera.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Audible, quite audible. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. And namaskar, all of you. Really, it's a great privilege on my part to share a few moments with you all, giants, professors, and my dear colleagues, and all the participants. Actually, it's really a golden moment for me. So, at the outset, respected Professor Saroj Kumar Mahanti sir, the president of this 34th AOPO, and Vice President, esteemed Ganesh Prasad Das sir, and Dr. Bhaskar Chandra Sahu, General Secretary, Editor, Professor Ramchandra Majhi sir, Advisor, though he is not present here, Professor P.K. Mahapatra, and our loving Basant Kumar Das sir, Treasurer. And as Ganesh sir has already said that Lieutenant Dr. Lakshman Patra is the surrogate secretary. Really, I am thankful, my dear friend Lakshman. So, I would start my presentation. Sir, may I allow to share my screen, sir, please?
Okay. You share your screen. Please go on.
So if it is being allowed by somebody, I think it is Dr. Lakshman, then I can share.
Lakshman, please permit.
Make him the host. You will present.
Yes, I think.
Hello, Lakshman. Lakshman. Hello.
Yeah, Deepak is presenting.
Deepak can सुनने तो मैं सेंड प्रेजेंट करो बटन करता
हाँ सर सर आशीष जी
You just
आशुच के दिसुने स्पष्ट हो नहीं तो कौन अच्छी
share screen.
गोटे कौन दिसु हाँ मर
Yeah,
दिसु
now it's come. Yeah.
हाँ ला ठीक है
Okay, thank you sir.
Make it full screen.
Okay.
This is in the PPT mode. Make it full screen.
So
full screen कर दो
hello.
Yes.
Sir, is it the full screen? I think the full screen is now visible, and I am completely audible.
Yeah.
हाँ ठीक है
Okay. Okay. So the title of my paper is Implicature Beyond Words from Grice's perspective.
Meaning beyond words.
Paul Grice, he is a British philosopher, 20th century philosopher. And it has been extracted from his book that is in 19. He has written a book that is in 1970.
Your voice is breaking.
बिबू ऑन म्यूट
Deepak,
कर
your
दे
voice
तो
is not clear.
साउंड ये ऑडियो ऑडियो
How implicature is being a part of our social life, and how philosophy has got intervention by taking the help of implicature, by taking the help of language in our day-to-day life. Actually, we are what is said by somebody, whether it is being properly understood by us or not, whether we understand the implied meaning, the suggested meaning, the hidden meaning or not. And if we are not adopting the hidden meaning, then
Deepak, you are not
Voice
audible.
went out.
You are not audible, Deepak.
कौन हला
Call Deepak.
ଦୀପକ ପଳେଇଲା ବାରିପଟ। ଲକ୍ଷ୍ମଣ
Sir.
ହ୍ୟାଲୋ ଲକ୍ଷ୍ମଣ ତାକୁ ଡାକ
ହଁ, sir.
ଦୀପକ ଡାକ।
ମୁଁ ଫୋନ କରୁଛି। କଣ କୁଆଡେ ଗଲୁ କୁଆଡେ? ନା ଶୁଭୁନି କିଛି, ନଟ୍ ଅଡିଓ। ସେ ଟୋଟାଲ ଲାଇନରେ ହିଁ ନାହିଁ, କହି ଚାଲିଛି।
ସେ କହୁଛି ମୁଁ କହୁଛି ବୋଲି। ସେ କହୁଛି ସେ ଶୁଣୁଛି ଆଉ କଣ।
ଆରେ ତୁ ମୂଳରୁ ଜଏନ କରିନୁ, ଲାଇନରେ ନାହୁଁ, ଦେଖେ ତୁ ଆଗେ ଜଏନ କର। ନା ତୁ ଲେଫ୍ଟ ହେଇଗଲୁ, ଟୋଟାଲ ଲିଷ୍ଟରେ ମୋ ପାଖରେ ନାହିଁ।
ଏଇନା ଦେଖିକି କହୁଛି କଟିଗଲା। Hello, Deepak, are you back?
डाइवर्ट करूनाहांती असुविधा होची सेमानक सर बृंदावन सर सर मु बारंबार म्यूट करूची आपण बारंबार अनम्यूट करूचंती
କାହାକୁ କହୁଛ?
ବୃନ୍ଦାବନ ମହାପାତ୍ର
ମୋର ତ ଅନମ୍ୟୁଟ ଥିଲା ନା, म्यूट ଥିଲା ନା?
ନା ନା
ଓହୋ ହୋ ଏବେ କଣ?
ବୃନ୍ଦାବନ ଦୀପକ
ଲକ୍ଷ୍ମଣ କୁଆଡେ ଗଲା ଦୀପକ?
ତୁ ମୋବାଇଲ ରେ ନହେଲେ ସେୟାର ସ୍କ୍ରିନ୍ କରେନି ତୁ ଡାଇରେକ୍ଟ ମୋବାଇଲ
ଦୀପକର ଗୋଟେ ସୁନ୍ଦର କାରବାର ହେଲା ଆଜି।
ହଁ ପରା ସିଏ ସଦାବେଳେ ଇଂଲିଶ ପାଠ କରି
ମାନେ ତାର ସୁନ୍ଦର କାରବାର ହେଲା ବୋଲି କହିକିରି ମୁଁ କହିବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଛି ଭାରି ଟେରିବୁଲ କାରବାର ହେଲା। ଏଇଟା ହଉଛି ଇମ୍ପ୍ଲିକେଚର।
ଯଦି ସିଷ୍ଟମ ରେ ହଉନି ମୋବାଇଲ ରେ ଡାଇରେକ୍ଟ ଆଡ୍ରେସ କର କିଛି ଅସୁବିଧା ନାହିଁ।
दीपक को कुह से मोबाइल रे खाली पढ़ी दऊ
हाँ हाँ
प्रेजेंटेशन न करिकरी
हम कहले
ଯୋଉଟା ତାର ଲେଖିଛି ତାର ପଢି ଦଉନି, ଆମେ ନ ପଢିଲୁ ନାହିଁ, ସେ ତାର ପଢି ଦଉନି।
ସେ ପଢା ଚଲେଇଛି ନା 9 ଲାଇନ ଲଗେଇ
ପଢି ଚଲେଇଛି। ତାହେଲେ ଦୂରବୀକ୍ଷଣ ଯନ୍ତ୍ର ଲଗା ତ ଆମର ଗୋଟେ ଗୋଟେ।
हाँ दीपक now join हाँ दीपक स्टार्ट
ଏଇ ଦୀପକ ଯୋଗୁ ସବୁ ଯୋଉମାନେ ଜଏନ କରିଥିଲେ ସେ ପଳେଇଲେଣି। 126 ଜଣ ଥିଲେ, ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ 89 ଜଣ ଅଛନ୍ତି।
97 दीपक
ସେମିନାର ସାରିଦେଲା ଆଉ କଣ କରିବ?
ନାଇଁ ନହେଲେ ତ ନେକ୍ସଟ ସେସନ ଆମେ ନହେଲେ ଯିବା ଆଉ କଣ
ସେୟା କରିବା।
ହଁ ଏ ବେଟର ଦ୍ୟାଟ।
ସେୟା କରିବା।
ସେ ତାର କଣ ଗୋଟେ ଅସୁବିଧା।
So Deepak was discussing about implicature, and that is the task of Grice. Grice was also discussing a thing which is similar to Barthes. As it is known, implicature meaning is like the one that I just conveyed. And Vrindavan was saying that the weather is very fine. By saying that the weather is fine, he was trying to make an implicature that the weather is terrible. So in this
Hello.
way, Deepak,
हाँ हाँ सर
बाकी तो जहाँ अच्छी 10 मिनट सारल
सर 10
ନା ତ ବାକି ତ ସମୟ ତମର ରହିଲେ ମୁଁ ଆଉ କଣ କରିବି? I have to
Depend on message.
I can go up to 11:30 only, not beyond that.
ହଁ ସାର୍ ସେଟା କମ୍ପ୍ୟୁଟର କଣ ଅସୁବିଧା ହେଲା ଏଟା ତ
କମ୍ପ୍ୟୁଟର ତ ଅସୁବିଧା ନାହିଁ, ତମେ ପଢି ଦେଇଥାନ୍ତ, କମ୍ପ୍ୟୁଟର କଣ ଅସୁବିଧା ହେଲା? You do it within 10 minutes, please.
Okay sir, okay. So I have mainly I want to focus on the Grice notion of implicature and the problem, and he has introduced very beautiful notion of implicature, that is conversational implicature. And the conversational implicature, if you divide conversational implicature, then there are other two implicature, that is conventional implicature and non-conventional implicature. Then there is a dimension of conventional implicature. We'll see how Grice is trying to introduce this implicature by the help of the principle. The principle is known as cooperative principle. Okay. So let me conclude this within, as Ganesh sir has suggested that within 10 minutes, or I have to be so generally implicature means the action of implying meaning beyond the literal sense. What is said is not sometimes the etymological meaning, the linguistic meaning is something different. For example, if I say that I am tired. I am tired means here somebody asked me, let's go home and have a cup of tea. Here my answer is to that person is I am tired. So when I say that I am tired means I implied the meaning to that speaker that I am not in a position, or I am not willing to go with you for a cup of tea. So this is the conversational implicature. This is the meaning of conversational implicature. Means I am tired means I am not telling that I will not go with you, but I am tired means it implies the negative meaning is I am tired. The implied meaning I don't want to go with you. So here the another factor, that is truth conditional theory of meaning, suggests that the meaning of a given proposition when the sentence is used. For example, when I say that snow is white means if and only the snow is white, it is truth. That is truth conditional meaning. But in conversational implicature, sometimes the truth, it is not necessary that it must be a truth conditional one. When we are talking about the conversational aspect, it may not be the sentence may not have a truth conditional. It may the sentence may not be. Let us see how. If you analyze our point, then let me give you an example without going to the deep. For example, A, Rama is short and he is strong. Rama is short and he is strong. B, in B, Rama is short but he is strong. Here, the truth conditions are same. First example, Rama is short and he is strong. Second example, Rama is short but he is strong. So Grice noticed that even if these two sentences or two propositions have the same truth condition, but Grice had pointed out that here in one of the sentence or one of the proposition, that is Ram is short but, the word but is contrast one. It means Ram is short but he is strong, means it implied that even if Ram is short, he is strong. Even if Ram is short, he is strong. So here, even if Ram is short means it is not expected that to be strong, Ram has to fulfill shortness. So shortness was not expected here. Shortness was not expected. That is why it creates contrast. Even if they have same truth condition, same truth, all these two sentences have the truth condition, but it is non-truth conditional also from this perspective of Grice. And he wanted to show three types of conversational implicature. One is generalized, and another is particular, and the third one is scalar. So when we are talking about generalized conversational implicature, here it is the sentence or the proposition is loosely context bound. For example, commonly triggered by indefinite article. For example, the arsonist put a house on fire. Here, A is an indefinite article, and it does not imply that. So, if the arsonist put fire on a house, it is not the house of himself, or it may be the house of somebody. So, here the context is loosely context bound or context independent, we can say. In particular, conversational implicature, that is strongly context bound. When we are saying about the particular in conversational implicature, it is the context is strongly bounded. For example, if somebody says, do you want to go to the picnic tomorrow? And the answer is coming from the other side that my father is coming for a visit tomorrow. So here somebody asked, do you want to go to the picnic tomorrow? So whether you are coming with us to attend that picnic or not, and the respondent is not saying that I am not coming with you, but here it is being said that my father is coming to visit tomorrow. It indicates that, it implied that I am not coming with you. So in particular conversational implicature, the meaning is strongly context bound. Another form of implicature, that is scalar. Scalar means, just I would like to say, it is the use of scale. It is the use of scale. So here we are using a scale. Degree of, we can say that we denote degree of something, thereby implicating the negation of degree of chosen one. So in scalar implication, it gives rise to the certain scale value. For example, some boys went to the party. For example, some boys went to the party. So here, some means not all the boys went to the party. So here we have to choose between scale. If it is a scale in front of me, then I will not pick a boy went to the party. I will not pick all the boy went to the party. I will pick the that scale, the amount of scale, that is some boys went to the party. So it has been described by Grice. So Grice has introduced another notion, that is how to be fruitful in our implicature. He has suggested that is cooperative principle, and cooperative principle is acting as an umbrella. Cooperative principle is acting as an umbrella, the term principle that guide our conversation. So our conversation must be guided by something. It is not that we do conversation, we make dialogue for the sake of dialogue. No, it must have a common value. When we talk something with somebody, we must have a common purpose. So it is the cooperative principle is acting here an umbrella. So a question may be raised that what is the cooperative principle? What are the maxims introduced by Grice, so that we can effectively communicate our communication must be our communication must be rational. How? Number one, one of the maxim, that is the quality maxim. Quality maxim, just Grice want to say, focus that. Give number one. What is quality maxim? Quality maxim means we have to give the correct information. We have to give the correct information. For example, where is she? The answer, people say that she is in abroad, means we have to depend on a third party authority. So it should not be. Number two, that is Grice that he wants to establish another maxim, that is quantity maxim. So what is quantity maxim? Quantity maxim means give an appropriate amount of information. Here quantity maxim means if during our conversation you have to give an appropriate amount of information. Appropriate amount of information means, just I will not delve into deeper sense, just I am picking the example. When somebody says that how are you, if your answer is how are you, hello, हेलो आप am I audible? हेलो
हाँ कौन है
हाँ सर के जन लोग लिखुचन तो कोन मेसेज जे क्लियर साउंड आसुनी बोली ठीक अछि
ना ठीक है ठीक है ठीक है
ସାଉଣ୍ଡ ଠିକ ଅଛି ମୁଁ ତାକୁ ରିପ୍ଲାଏ କରିସାରିଲିଣି ଯେ
अच्छा अच्छा ठीक
सारो
है
सिंह सारो दीपक सारो
हाँ सर
दीपक प्लीज वाइंड अप
बढ़िया गुड एनीवे ठीक अछि नेक्स्ट maxim is the relevance maxim so in the relevance maxim Grice wanted to say that the information delivered by speaker to the hearer must be informative. For example, a speaker, if he says, where is the book, where is the book, and in reply, if somebody says that my son has gone outside, means he is not in a mood to have a study. So number 4 maxim is that is avoid the maxim from the standpoint of manner. Avoid ambiguity. So from the standpoint of manner, it is our role to avoid ambiguity of expression. For example, did Ramo like the joke? If somebody asks, did Ramo like the joke? Then in answer, if somebody says that his lips turned slightly upward, no, it should not be. His lips should lips turned slightly upward. If the question is, did Ramo like the joke? The answer from the standpoint of manner, if the reply is his lips turned slightly upward, then it creates ambiguity. So ambiguity must be expunged from our during our conversation. We have to expunge the ambiguity also. There are 4 maxim actually. So let me come to the conclusion. Here conclusion is that knowing a language is not simply a matter of knowing how to encode a message and transmit them to a second party who by decoding them what we intended to say. Conversation is a collaborative activity and meaning is context bound. Implicature in our daily life creates an effective communication and it maintains a good social relation and it enrich our utterance. Whatever we utter, our utterances must be enriched. And how? And utterances, because nowadays we sometimes we are not in a position to say something directly to the listener, because why I'm telling, just I'm concluding my part, because if I say something directly that, for example, my son got failed in the exam, and if I say that son, you failed in the exam, so it could be said that son, there is a next chance, there is a next chance. So when I say that there is a next chance, it implied that you have not qualified in the exam. So sometimes direct speaking to in the direct meaning, it creates problem. That is why notion of implicature has been introduced, and conversational implicature is one of them. Anyway, in spite of a lot of problem, I hope
thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation in spite of the lot of troubles. This again is a sociological study of language, and I thank you for bringing that part of linguistic study into focus. And this study, this paper goes into the same pocket as the previous one. This is a sociological study of language, that is a scientific study of language. This is very much relevant for study of literary texts. We have 2 noun forms. One is implication and the other is implicature. Implication is studied by logicians and philosophers, and this implicature is studied by a group of philosophers of language like Grice. This, as Deepak said, that this sense goes beyond the literal sense, that is cognitive sense. This is part of the cognitive meaning that Grice is studying. So thank you very much for the presentation. And you did not say how far it is philosophically relevant, Grice study. Grice has other studies which are philosophically very much relevant. But how this part is relevant, I am unable to follow. I now put this to the audience for queries and your replies. Ranjit, pacharibe?
Thank you, Professor Das. Now we could not hear him in totality. Anyway, implicature is one of the very important aspects of our social interaction and social communication, as you have said. Now, when we are discussing the earlier paper, we have referred to the pragmatics of language, and here actually in implicature, the pragmatics becomes more relevant than any other level of language. This is what is a small addition that I have made. Thank you.
Now, this belongs to the pragmatics of language, not to syntax and semantics. Deepak should have made it clear. He has not done so. And he should have made a distinction between implication and implicature, which I did just now. Anyway, any other question from the audience?
Well, let me congratulate Deepak for discussing this topic. Conversational implicature is a topic that is very much philosophically relevant. I would submit that it is philosophically relevant. Most of our language have not only implications but have implicature, and he has brought these facts into focus. And you can also discuss these questions further. Sorry that
how, sir, can we bring this into philosophical discussion in order to solve philosophical problems? Implicature?
Pardon?
Implicature को हमें केमती उपयोग करी परिवा philosophical problem solve करियारे?
Okay, but when we talk, language has, as we talk of implications, the implications, when I say that is already 11:39, that means he has to finish it within that particular period. That means we are saying that you please go, you leave and others come.
discussion आरंभ कला बेलू जो कथा उठिला पागो भारी भलो हिची पागो भारी भलो हिची कहू चाहिए आमे कहू जे पागोटा भारी खराब है. That is all right. But this is a function of
when we talk of Austin. When Austin talks of illocutionary, percolationary, and these are, you can say that that is also a philosophical relevant because
that is relevant to the study of language.
That is what when we talk of when Deepak
and
is
every part and every
this,
concern of language is not philosopher's concern.
Should you limit it only to one particular type of
discussion? Philosophers are always they are used to bring out the hidden meaning, the hidden aspect of things. So, implicature is the hidden side of the language that we use. So, it is definitely philosophically relevant.
Where cognitive meaning is hidden, the philosopher comes into the picture to bring out that.
That is all right. The cognitive meaning is but language is multifaceted and it has various functions.
Language is multifaceted and study is multifaceted also, but there is a division of labor between the scientist and the philosopher. There is a division of labor that is very much important for 20th century philosophy.
When we try to when we use language for various purposes. Sometimes also to offend somebody and sometimes to praise somebody and other things which are not direct implications, they are not part, cognitive part of meaning is there. Okay, thank you.
Anyway, the study, this sort of study, which both the Beheras, Dr. Beheras have done, are not irrelevant. They are relevant surely, but they have their own places. So I thank both of them once again for their presentations, and there are no questions in the chat box. So I think this session is over, and I hand over the microphone with thanks to Professor S.K. Mahanti to go on with other proceedings. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Prasad.